Welcome to Manifest, hosted by international evangelist, teacher, and author Perry Stone. Enjoy unique insight into prophetic and practical truth. It's time to feast on fresh manna, so get ready to be blessed and encouraged. And now, here is your host and teacher, Perry Stone.
You know, for many years, I've stood here, in fact, for 15 years of the Manifest telecast in this one spot doing programs. We usually do 4 programs from what we call the Mount of Olives overlooking the old city of Jerusalem. And today, I'm going to be sharing with you a rather controversial message, and hopefully we'll get the details to you that will help you to understand a subject that I call Elijah and the rebuilding of the third temple. Elijah and the rebuilding of the third temple. We have our partners tour here that we do every year. 150 people from around the world. Give the Lord a clap. And let's just welcome you here. And thank you for the opportunity of being here as well. Now, let's begin where we should start as far as the prophetic is concerned. When you read the book of Revelation, chapter 11, there's a verse that says that to measure the temple of God and they that worship therein, but the court that is without leave out, for it's given to the Gentiles, and they shall trample the city for 42 months. John wrote the book of Revelation approximately, they think, about 95 AD. He probably died, according to Rick Renner, who's a great researcher in Greek, around 100 AD after he came off the Isle of Patmos. In 95 AD, what is interesting is the temple in Jerusalem had been destroyed for 25 years. In other words, had you been living back at the time when the book of Revelation was written, this entire platform would have been in ruins. The temple would have been in ruins. No stone was left upon another. According to Matthew 24, it's what Jesus predicted. And so there was no sacrifice. There was no temple. There was no priesthood. The Jews were dispersed. And that's the setting. So now John is looking not in his day, 95 AD. What he's doing, he's looking into the future, because the book of Revelation is a very futuristic book. In fact, after studying it for years, chapter 4 all the way to chapter 22, I believe, are futuristic, meaning that those events are going to happen in the future. And the book of Revelation deals with the day of the Lord. John says, I was in the Spirit and saw the Lord's day. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, he said in Revelation chapter 1. And the Lord's day there doesn't mean the Sabbath. He would have used a different Greek word there. It meant the day of the Lord that the prophets talked about in the Old Testament. So the book of Revelation deals with the time of vengeance or judgment that's going to be released on earth during the time known as the day of the Lord, or John said the Lord's day. Now, having said that, John is stepping out into the future, into the time called the tribulation. Jesus talked about tribulation in Matthew chapter 24. The Greek word there means a time of great distress, of great crisis. It is a very negative time, according to Daniel chapter 12, a time of trouble such as was not when there was a nation nor ever shall be. Jesus went as far as to say in Matthew 24 that except the days be shortened, there would be no flesh saved, but for the elect's sake, he would shorten the days. So we're talking about a very serious crisis. Now, if we go in the book of Daniel, we discover that the tribulation is not for the church, because the church did not exist in Daniel's writing. It is a new covenant entity. It is an organism that was formed by Jesus Christ. So it is not for the church. The church is mentioned in Revelation chapters 2 and 3, and then it's never mentioned again through the entire book. Now, the word saints is used in the tribulation, in the book of Revelation, and in the book of Daniel, the word saints is used as well. In Daniel's setting, the Hebrew word there means the holy ones. It's translated as the holy ones. And in the New Testament, there's a Greek word for saints, which again implies the word holy. In the tribulation, and I believe about chapter 4, somewhere in chapter 4, beginning of chapter 4 of Revelation, in the setting of events that John is seeing, that the catching away of the church has happened somewhere at that point, which draws the attention totally back to the Middle East and to Israel, because the events of the tribulation, if you'll read the prophet Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, center on this part of the world. They center on Israel. They center on the king of the north, king of the south, kings of the east, which are the great Asian nations, which could include China, which also could include India. So in the tribulation, it's centering on this part of the world. Now, the biggest part of the tribulation, if you'll read the book of Daniel and also Matthew 24 along with Revelation, will center in the city of Jerusalem. And this is the city of Jerusalem, the old city. Now, this is the Temple Mount platform where Solomon's temple once stood, and also the temple of Jesus' day and Herod's day once stood. And now you see the Islamic mosque called the Dome of the Rock. It's a very beautiful 8-sided octagon-shaped mosque with a gold dome. And then over to the other side, which is this direction here, is another Islamic mosque called the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, this particular Temple Mount area was lost in 70 AD at the destruction of the temple when Titus and the 10th Legion came to the city of Jerusalem, and they surrounded the city, and they of course, Titus told them to save the Jewish temple kind of as a monument of their victory, but a Roman soldier took a torch and threw it in. The building caught on fire on the inside, and the gold that was in there began to melt. And so what the Roman soldiers did when it cooled off is they toppled the stones to get the gold off, and that fulfilled actually the scripture of Jesus in Matthew 24 when he showed the disciples the building of the temple, and he said, not one stone will be left upon another that shall not be thrown down. So that happened in the year 70 AD. Now, since that time, there has not been any type of a Jewish edifice that would be considered a Jewish temple on top of this Temple Mount since 70 AD. Even when Israel came back in 1948, nothing was done to the Temple Mount. It remains into the hands of the Islamic control. 1967 war, when this was the country of Jordan and that was the country of Israel. And after the 67 war, Israel annexed all of the area here. Even after that period of time, the Temple Mount platform was not given over to the Jewish control at all. In fact, it was handed back over to the Muslims so that there would not be further war or further conflict. Now, where does this leave us as it relates to the book of Revelation, as it relates to the prophet Daniel? And here's what we're going to tell you. There are 3 New Testament references to a temple. Matthew chapter 24, Jesus says in verse 15, he says, the gospel would be preached in verse 14, and all the world is a witness unto all nations, and then the end would come. And then he goes into verse 15 and talks about, then there shall be an abomination that makes the city desolate. And he says, let him that readeth understand. Now, that abomination that makes Jerusalem desolate is referred to in the book of Daniel. And so Daniel's prophecy coincides with what Jesus said in Matthew 24. And I will tell you that the abomination that makes Jerusalem desolate is found, and John's the one that saw this, in Revelation chapter 13, when a false prophet will make an image to the beast, and he makes the image speak and live, and if you don't worship the image, you are beheaded, according to Revelation chapter 20. And there's a lot of people that are beheaded in the tribulation period because they will not worship the beast nor take the mark of the beast in any form. The mark, of course, is the mark on the right hand or the forehead, or the name of the beast or the number of the beast. So when that image is made, it's a lying miracle. Paul talked about it in 2 Thessalonians 2, when he talked about there would be lying miracles, deceivableness of unrighteousness, satanic miracles that would cause people to be deceived because they don't love the truth. So Jesus referred to that in Matthew 24:15 first. Paul talked about it in 2 Thessalonians 2, and John confirms what it is in Revelation chapter 13. Now here's what's odd. Matthew 24 mentions an abomination that makes Jerusalem desolate. Then you come to 2 Thessalonians 2, Paul says that the Antichrist as God will sit in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Then you come to the book of Revelation, where the temple has been destroyed for 25 years, and John writes about a future temple, and he says, measure the temple and the court that's without leave out, for it's given to the Gentiles. Now I want to show you something here that's very interesting. First of all, if there were to be in the future a temple built, and there's going to be, and there's no way, let me tell you something. I want to tell you, and I think we all understand this, especially in America. When God gets ready to do something, ain't nobody going to stop it. Okay? I mean, look. The media can say one thing, the press can say one thing, the people's opinions can be one thing, but when it's time for something to happen prophetically, it's just going to happen, and everybody's going to say, huh? When it happens. I mean, it just happens. What can you say? I mean, if we pray and ask God to do His will and His purpose, and He does it, why should we be shocked if God does His will and purpose? But it is going to happen one day that there is a temple of some type, and it is a Jewish temple, and it's going to be on the Temple Mount. Now, this brings up a whole can of worms if you say that publicly, because people say, all right, what do you do with the dome? And the answer is absolutely nothing. It stays. How do I know that? Let's go to the book of Revelation. Measure the temple of God and they that worship therein. Now, this is not the temple in heaven. This is the temple on earth. But the court that's without, leave out, for it will be given to the Gentiles. It's done through a peace treaty, Daniel 9:27. All right, and the Gentiles, will trample the city for 42 months. Now, they don't trample it. Let's go back. The tribulation is 7 years in length. So they don't trample it the first 42 months. They trample it the last 42 months. That's why in Daniel, he talks about the time of trouble being time, that's a year, times, that's 2 years, dividing the times half a year. How long is that? 42 months, 3.5 years. That's exactly what it says in the book of Revelation. They'll trample the city for 42 months. So John is giving you a nugget that Daniel didn't totally see. Daniel gave you a time frame, but John gives you the time frame and tells you what happens in the time frame. Now, here's the biggest question of all. Who in the world could exist that could build a structure, a Jewish structure, and build an altar to this side, not this side. This side is the Alaska Mosque, there's the dome, but it would be on this side over here. And by the way, the temple area is not that large. We actually, Charlie might be able to find the video footage. We marked it off and then got kicked off the platform after we did it. But one day we decided, Robert will remember this, didn't we, Robert? We marked it off, and it's not that big. You think of it being massive. It's not that big of a structure. And so what happens is that it is built, and then once it's built, it says the sacrifice ceases, and it appears, and I'm going to say appears, that it's dedicated at Passover, and that when the sacrifice of dedication is offered, that's when the Antichrist comes in and takes it over. Then the image is put up in Daniel on the wing of the temple. It reads in Hebrew, the wing of the temple. So the image is put, and this crazy image starts speaking and living, and the people go crazy because it's a satanic miracle, and that's where the deception of the Antichrist and false prophet come in, and that's where they issue the mark of the beast, meaning join our religion and you'll eat and you'll buy and sell. You don't join our religion, you're going to die. And that's what Revelation 13 is about. So I'm going to show you the key of how this is done. It cannot totally be done politically. It's totally impossible. It cannot totally be done by one mortal man. It's going to be done, everybody ready for this, by the prophet Elijah. I say, wait a minute, I don't know about that. Okay, let's go back. In Malachi chapter 4, Malachi the prophet says, through the Lord's inspiration, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and terrible day of the Lord. The terrible day of the Lord is the latter part of the tribulation called the greater tribulation, where all the judgments are totally released. I will send to you Elijah before the great and terrible day of the Lord, who will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, hearts of the children to the fathers. Now, someone said that was John the Baptist. No. John the Baptist is referred to prophetically in Malachi chapter 3 at the very early as the voice of one crying in the wilderness. That's the John the Baptist prophecy. They asked John, are you Elijah? He said, I'm not Elijah. Now, he came in the spirit and power of Elijah, but he was not Elijah. The Elijah the Bible's talking about is the Elijah that you read about in 2 Kings chapter 2, who was taken alive in a chariot of fire, who will be reserved till the time of the end to be one of the two witnesses in Revelation chapter 11. There will be two men, they're identified as two witnesses. Their symbolism are two olive trees that have the anointing oil flowing through them. That's an imagery, by the way, found in the book of Zechariah. And they will have such power. Now, this is real important. I'm going to give you a nugget here. They will have such power that they will be able to shut the heavens for 42 months where it does not rain. They will be able to have the sign of fire coming down out of heaven. So here's what happens. When you have these prophets, and I believe that one is definitely Elijah. Now, Bill Cloud, who's a dear friend of mine, we laugh about this. Bill says it's Moses because he says that he's got this whole theory about Moses that says God buried him, but yet he didn't actually die, and he's going to come back and all that. But the only two men in the Bible that never died are Enoch and Elijah. And in Jude, it says, Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, the Lord's coming with 10,000s of his saints to execute what? Judgment on the earth. So Enoch predicted judgment coming and connected it to the return of the Lord. I think he has to come and die at some point, so he's one of the two witnesses. And then you have Elijah the prophet, who was taken alive in a chariot of fire. He has to come back to earth, and he's the other. Now, the Bible says that there comes a time of the restitution of all things, and it even tells you that Elijah must come and restore all things. So that people in John's day pointed that to John the Baptist, but John restored nothing. All John did was introduce Jesus. Jesus is actually the one who brought redemption, not John the Baptist. John the Baptist said Jesus was the Lamb of God that was going to take away the sins of the world, see. So when you look at that, the context of the New Testament, it is not John the Baptist that it was talking about. It is Elijah in the future who comes and restores all things. Now, here's the point. If you have a man that appears in this city and all of a sudden he says, we're going to construct a place of worship right up here on the mountain where the previous temples were, watch this. Anybody who comes against him gets instantly judged. I mean, he can shut the heavens. He can call fire down. And there's one thing you have to understand, that when those types of signs and wonders are activated in the tribulation period, there's nobody going to touch these two guys. I mean, it's just like, mess with me, you're going to drop dead. Bam, they're dead. You think anybody's going to mess with them? Absolutely not. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's very, very interesting that I thought was not just interesting, but fascinating. I'm not going to name him because I don't have permission to use his name on the program. But there is a Hebrew professor from the Hebrew University that many years ago studied the Temple Mount, and he studied the rebuilding of the temple. And he told a friend of mine, Mike Coleman, who's probably watching this program now from Florida, but he told Mike in a private home meeting, he said, now Mike, if the Jew, because Mike was talking about if the Jews were to rebuild a temple, how long would it take? Now this is going to amaze a lot of you, but this is coming from a Jewish professor who's not a Christian. He said, well, you have to do certain ceremonies on festival days. You have to have a red heifer to purify. And he said, actually, this is crazy. From the beginning to the time of dedication is 3.5 years. Oh, well, 3.5 years. Now, so what that means is, let's assume, now look, this is not Perry Stone predicting something. This is an assumption. Let's assume that the pattern of the fall festivals is correct, that the coming of the Lord will be in the fall, because those 3 festivals have not been fulfilled. Trumpets, atonement, tabernacles. It's the rapture, tribulation, and the kingdom. Let's just say on a fall month the Lord returns. Okay, let's go 1 year forward. That brings you to the fall month again. Can we use trumpets as an example? Trumpets to trumpets, 1 year. Trumpets to trumpets is 2 year. Trumpets to trumpets is 3 year. 6 months later, Passover. So the temple's dedicated at Passover. It would have to be dedicated at Passover. So the sacrifice the Bible talks about that the Antichrist causes to cease is that one. And watch this. Then after 42 months, in fact, I think it was 3 of the early fathers. I don't, off memory, I wish I could tell you which ones they were, but 3 of them said that it would be Enoch and Elijah. They would be the 2 witnesses that would come, and they'll come the first 42 months. So what happens is the Antichrist comes in, and the restrainer is lifted, 2 Thessalonians 2, and he's permitted to kill the 2 witnesses, which again, I believe would be Enoch and Elijah. They lay their dead bodies in the streets for 3.5 days. They're laying there in the open, just rotting. You know, in the sun, after 4 days, the body begins to deteriorate. And then it says, a voice from heaven says, come up here. And they're resurrected in front of everybody. I mean, can you imagine what that's going to be like? All of a sudden, they're caught up. And then it says that an earthquake happens and shakes the city and divides it. A third of the city is taken down, and there are 7,000 that die. Now remember, what in the Old Testament it says that in the time of Elijah, 7,000 had not bowed their knee. Now we see 7,000 dying in the tribulation. See, it's a parallel there. So we see that Elijah still has that connection in the tribulation period. So at that point, what happens is the Antichrist comes into the city of Jerusalem. He takes over that temple, sets up that image of Revelation chapter 13. But let me go back to the original point, because we don't want to preach beyond what he does the final 42 months, because our emphasis today is how Elijah will return. Now, it's interesting that even in among devout Jews who celebrate Pesach or Passover, that they have a ceremony that they go through. As you know, there's different cups with the fruit of the vine in it and the bread and all. They go through the ceremony. But before they do, usually one of the children in the house will go to the front door and open the door to see if the prophet Elijah has come to announce that the Messiah is coming. So in Judaism, among devout Jews, when they celebrate Passover, Elijah is connected to that season. Now, isn't that interesting? Because I just told you, based on the pattern, that the dedication of the temple would happen when? Passover. So these 2 witnesses will come, and Elijah the prophet will be one of them. And if you want to know where all this is, Malachi 4:5, the very last part of the verse, chapter 4, the last part of the verse talks about Elijah the prophet. Revelation chapter 11 talks about the 2 witnesses. Then you go back, you flip over to the book of Zechariah, and he has this whole imagery. In fact, Zechariah is a great prophetic book a lot of people don't read. Chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, actually, especially. Those chapters are tremendous. They talk about horsemen with different colors. That's parallel to the book of Revelation. It talks about the 2 olive trees pouring out the golden oil before the throne of God. God. That's the imagery of Revelation chapter 11. And so one day in the future, and it will come, it can't just come through a treaty, it will come through a treaty. And someone says, no, wait a minute, how would anybody who, if you know the Islamic religion, they would never allow, for example, a temple to be built there. So why would they even consider it? Because after the war of Gog and Magog, Persia, and you have Togarmah, and you have Libya, and you have a lot of these nations which happen today be strong Islamic nations. They're going to have a great defeat during that war, and they're going to be willing to come and make a treaty. In fact, it's real interesting that in Daniel 9:27, the treaty that is made in the tribulation is 7 years in length, and it tells you in the book of Ezekiel that they burn weapons for 7 years. And so it's possible, I'm not dogmatic on this, it's possible that the war of Gog and Magog is what actually introduces that treaty that Daniel 9:27 talks about, that brings in the Antichrist. And by the way, he's not going to be known as Antichrist. He will have a name. He will have a political name, because it says count the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man. And it talks about buying and selling in his name. So he's not going to be, hey, hello, Mr. Antichrist, hello, Mr. False Prophet. I mean, they're going to have names. This is what sometimes when Christians hear this, they fail to realize. It is a human being. It is a person motivated by one of the strongest demonic powers, probably a spirit similar to what possessed Adolf Hitler. Might be the best example, or possessed Nero in the Roman Empire time. Could be the best example of the type of spirit that will control the Antichrist. So my point is that the city that we're looking at here is where all of the major prophetic events are going to happen in the time of the end during the tribulation period. Now, the good news is that Jesus returns, and the reason He returns, the Bible tells us He saves the tents of Judah first, and He comes back to save national Israel and to set up His kingdom. And I'm standing, I'm going to estimate here, probably about 3,000 yards away from the actual Mount of Olives where He will touch down. Hey, what's it feel like? Hey, what's it feel like to be standing here where He's going to touch down? Isn't it amazing? Amazing. Now, a lot of these people have never been to Israel before, right? How many of you have never been to Israel before? Raise your hand. That's the whole group. No wonder they're so pumped up and excited. My goodness. Now, let's give the Lord a hand of praise again from the city of Jerusalem.
Messages from the main event are now available on CD and DVD. Don't miss these 5 new prophetic messages by Perry Stone and 3 amazing messages by some of America's most anointed ministers. Perry's 5 messages are titled Prophetic Insight into the New Jewish Year 5778, America's Prophetic Cosmic Wars, Demons and Angels, The Chronicles of Counting Prophetic Time, The Sign, the Shaking, and the Seal of the Covenant, and Should a Christian be a Prepper? In these teachings, Perry shares the stunning prophetic implications concealed in the Jewish New Year 5778. Discover the 6 warfare lessons and the 4 repetitive patterns in history in his message about cosmic wars. Learn how God counts prophetic time with revealed and concealed set times, and how false covenants are initiating the time of the end. Perry shows the rabbinical Messianic age sign linked to the Jewish menorah and delves into the controversy of Christian prepping, giving biblical answers dealing with the subject of being prepared for a major crisis. Also included are 3 dynamic messages by guest speakers presenting practical truth for your spiritual growth. Jensen Franklin explains how to be made whole. Ron Carpenter helps you get into the mind of God as he details unlocking the mystery within the mystery. John Kilpatrick delivered a powerful message on releasing the power of the blessing that will change how you speak over your children, family, and church. The 8 CDs are available for your donation of $55 or more. DVDs can be yours for a donation of $95 or more, which includes special pictures and scriptures used by our speakers. To request your set of CDs or DVDs of the main event, visit our website at perrystone.org or call our toll-free number 1-888-21-BREAD. That's 1-888-212-7323. You may also write us at Perry Stone, P.O. Box 3595, Cleveland, Tennessee, 37320, and request offer number 17ME-CDs for $55 or 17ME-DVDs for $95. Shipping and handling are included. We believe you will enjoy the powerful teaching and preaching from the main event and the great spiritual understanding and encouragement it will bring to your life. We look forward to hearing from you soon.
The subject of the rebuilding of a temple on the Temple Mount is the most controversial subject a minister or anyone, for that matter, could discuss. However, as we shared with you in this teaching, it is predicted in Bible prophecy it will happen the first 42 months of the tribulation, and we have no doubt from prophecy that Elijah the prophet will return and be one of the individuals responsible for that. We don't want to add any more to that or take away from it, other than to say to you that interesting times are here. I know that if you keep up with prophecy, you know that. I know that in April, as we do every year, we have our International Prophetic Summit with 5 speakers, and it's a favorite, and because people who know the Bible want to understand the times. Now, I'm not saying everyone does, but many do. But thank you for joining me. Now we have this week and next week only for the main event DVDs and CD offers. Now, I edit out a lot of stuff that I will not put on TV that are in the CDs and DVDs. Hope you get those because that offer is just about to expire. We'll be coming to some places soon. In the month of January, our biggest meeting in January will be Evangel Temple Assembly of God in Jacksonville, Florida, Friday night, February the 26th, 2 services on Saturday and also all day Sunday. Pastor Gary Wiggins, come and join me. We're coming to Alabama. We've not been there in quite some time, but we're coming the 2nd through the 4th. That's a Friday night through Sunday night with Pastor Victor Massey, Summerton, Alabama, at the Summerton Church of God Ignite. So please remember that. I want you to participate in that. And finally, for the month of February, Free Chapel, Orange County, coming back to Irvine, California, Friday night, the 16th of February through the 18th. And we're going to stay through Sunday night there. We didn't do that this last time. So those are great things that's happening. And also Warrior Fest 1 and Warrior Fest 2. One is in March, one is in April. The biggest youth event we have all year with thousands of young people is getting ready it's time to register. No fee to come, no registration fee. It is free. One main conference of young people. This one is free in the United States right here. And so you've got to register. So OCIministries.org is where you register for that. So perrystone.org, Facebook Live, that's how you can keep up with me with a lot of the things that are happening. Now, we will be, in the next couple weeks, beginning to air some programs that were taught in Israel. We went to Israel this past November of 2017, and I taped 36 television programs. I had a little bit of a throat infection that hit me, so on some of those programs, my voice is really rough, and when you hear that, you'll need to know that's what happened, but we kept on pressing through, and we got it done. We did 2 special prophecy messages from Petra in Jordan. Never have done that in 16 years of the Manifest telecast. Those will be aired somewhere in 2018 as well. So I want you to be looking for the new Israel programs. And speaking of Israel, most of you know this if you keep up with prophetic things. Israel's 70th birthday is 2018. Now, this is a very significant prophetic number. It is a number of deliverance, freedom, and victory. And they are expecting the largest attendance in history to come to Israel from all over the world. I mean, people from China, people from Indonesia, Singapore, Africa, they're pouring into the country. So we have 2 back-to-back trips, and may I suggest to you to contact us and get on early, because I'm telling you, the airlines are flying full and the hotels are packed all year long next year. So we want you to come either on our Partners Tour or Main Tour, and you can go to perrystone.org and get the information about the tour. Hey, I'll be back next week. Thank you. God bless you.